They thought humiliating a quiet black girl in the hallway would be just another morning flex, until the nobody they mocked moved with the precision of a pro wrestler's bloodline. In a school ruled by bullies with big mouths and zero IQ, Naomi Brooks broke their script without saying a word. Every shove they gave her was a warning they ignored, and every laugh pushed them closer to the moment their pride hit the floor harder than their bodies. The first Monday bell hadn't even rung when the hallways of Ridgewood High came alive. Lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, gossip ricocheting off the walls like loose bullets. Morning light spilled through the narrow windows, slicing across a sea of backpacks and Letterman jackets. Students moved in chaotic waves, each person trying to look more important than they actually were. And in the middle of that noisy, restless river walked a girl who didn't belong to its rhythm. Naomi Brooks, the new student, the outsider. The girl everyone noticed for reasons they couldn't quite name. She stepped into the main hallway with a calmness that clashed violently against the frantic chatter around her. Her dark braids lay perfectly over her shoulders, her posture straight, her steps steady. Too steady for someone walking into a school known for chewing new kids alive. Some students stared because she was new. Others stared because she carried herself like she wasn't afraid of anything here. And to teenagers who survive on hierarchy and insecurity, confidence is the biggest provocation. Whispers spread like spilled ink. Who's that? She looks intense. Is she a transfer? From where? Why does she walk like she owns the place? Naomi kept her eyes forward. If she heard the whispers, she didn't show it. She had heard enough versions of them in enough schools to fill a lifetime. Let them talk. Let them guess. None of them knew who she really was, or the world she came from. They couldn't possibly imagine the kind of training embedded in her bones, the kind of discipline carved into her muscles, the kind of father she had. But Ridgewood High was a place where boredom ruled, and boredom always searches for a target. That target chose her before she had even reached her locker. Chase Hartman, golden hair, bright orange varsity jacket, and the permanent smirk of a boy who'd never been told no in his entire life, stepped out from a cluster of boys and blocked her path. His friends, Wyatt and Logan, trailed behind him, already snickering like hyenas smelling fresh meat. Naomi shifted to walk around him. He shifted too, subtle, intentional, sticking out one foot just enough to trip her. She stumbled forward, catching herself before she hit the floor. Gasps rippled around them, followed by laughter, sharp and stinging. Wyatt let out a loud whistle. Logan clapped like he'd just seen a circus trick. "Well, damn," Chase laughed, leaning in. "New girl can't even walk straight?" The hallway roared with approval. But Naomi didn't react the way they expected. She turned slowly, controlled, deliberate, and lifted her eyes to Chase. No fear, no flinch, just a cold, steady stare that sliced straight through his cocky performance. For one brief, flickering second, Chase froze. His smirk cracked. Something tightened in his throat, and he swallowed hard before he could stop himself. He didn't know why, but that look unsettled him. He quickly forced a loud laugh, shoving Wyatt's shoulder as if nothing happened. "Relax, guys. She's just mad she can't keep up." But the energy in the hallway shifted. Students who had been laughing a second earlier now exchanged uncertain glances. Something about the girl, her posture, her eyes, her refusal to shrink, felt wrong, or rather, felt dangerous. It was the calm before the kind of storm Ridgewood High had never seen. And no one realized they had just poked the very thing they should have left alone. And then everything began to spiral faster than anyone expected. Long before first period even started, the red locker row at Ridgewood High had always been a stage. Shiny metal, bright lighting, and just enough foot traffic to guarantee an audience for whatever drama unfolded there. Today, that stage belonged to Naomi Brooks, whether she wanted it or not. She had barely reached her locker when Chase Hartman made his move. Without warning, he grabbed the strap of her backpack and yanked it backward with a violent jerk. The force ripped Naomi off balance. Her bag flew open, and books, pencils, a calculator, and a neatly packed lunch spilled across the hallway like a burst dam. The sound echoed, sharp, humiliating. Students stopped mid-stride. Some gasped. Some smirked. A few phones immediately lifted, recording. Wyatt whistled. "Damn, new girl. Didn't know your stuff wanted freedom that bad." Logan, already laughing, lifted his phone higher. "Hold up. This is gold. Ridgewood needs content." But then Wyatt leaned forward and, in an exaggerated mocking tone, mimicked a black accent badly, intentionally. "Aw, poor baby. You gonna cry? Gonna run home?" His friends burst out laughing. Naomi knelt slowly, gathering her things. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, not from shame, but from a heat building in her chest, a pressure that didn't belong in a quiet girl. A pressure that did not feel safe to let out. She forced her breath into a steady pattern, the way she had been trained her whole life. Don't react. Not here, not yet. But Chase wasn't done. He stepped closer, looming over her like a shadow she didn't ask for. "Hey," he taunted, nudging a book with his sneaker. "Didn't you hear my boy? We're talking to you." Naomi kept gathering her things. Chase crouched down behind her, voice low and venomous. "What's wrong? Too scared? Or do you just not know how to—" He reached for her hair. His fingers barely grazed a braid before it happened. Naomi's hand shot up, fast, precise, terrifyingly controlled, and clamped around his wrist. The sound Chase made was not a scream, but something sharper, strangled. His face twisted in shock as she squeezed, her grip far stronger than her frame suggested. Wyatt's jaw dropped. Logan lowered his phone an inch. Even the girls recording paused, their expressions shifting from amusement to disbelief. Chase tried to yank his arm back, but couldn't. "What the—" he hissed, breath catching. Naomi's expression didn't change. No smirk, no threat, just cold, steady anger simmering beneath calm skin. Then, just as quickly as she grabbed him, she released him, before any teacher could look over, before the gathered crowd could process what they'd seen. Chase stumbled backward, rubbing his wrist with wide, confused eyes. Wyatt leaned toward Logan, whispering urgently, "Bro, what the hell? She's strong. Like, what is she, a cyborg?" Logan didn't answer. His phone was shaking in his hand, not because he was recording badly, but because for the first time he wasn't sure he should be recording at all. Naomi rose to her feet, shoulders squared. She brushed dust off her clothes calmly, gathered the last of her belongings, and walked past them without a single word, her silence heavier than any shout could have been. The hallway parted for her as she moved. Students stared not with laughter anymore, but with something closer to unease, something closer to fear. Wyatt swallowed hard. How is this girl so strong? No one answered him. Not even Chase, because nobody understood what they had just seen, and Naomi wasn't about to explain. But if they thought that moment was a warning, they ignored it far too quickly. By lunchtime, Ridgewood High felt like a pressure cooker. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual chaos, metal trays clattering, soda cans popping open, clusters of students shouting across tables, but underneath the noise was a sharp, electric current. Something had shifted that morning, and everyone could feel it. The rumor hit the cafeteria long before Naomi walked in. She made Chase yelp like a puppy. "Bro, she didn't just grab him, she crushed his wrist. I heard he almost cried. Did you see the video? He flew like 2 inches, but still, it didn't matter that half the details were exaggerated. In high school, exaggeration wasn't a flaw, it was a sport. And today, Naomi Brooks was the headline. Students huddled in circles, replaying the short, shaky clips someone had secretly recorded. Even in low resolution, the moment Naomi grabbed Chase's wrist was unmistakably powerful. The way he recoiled, the shock on his face, those few seconds spread like wildfire. At the center of the cafeteria, Chase sat with Wyatt and Logan, jaw clenched so tight his teeth nearly cracked. His varsity jacket no longer looked like armor, more like a costume losing its shine. Wyatt slammed his tray on the table. "Dude, people think you got owned by a newbie," Logan hissed. "I told you we shouldn't have messed with her, man." "Something's off." Chase glared at both of them. His wrist was still red, still throbbing, and every pulse reminded him of the humiliation he'd suffered in front of half the hallway. He hated her for that. He hated how silent she'd been. He hated how calm she'd looked. He hated how one small moment had made him look weak, and in Chase's world, weakness wasn't allowed. "She thinks she can make a fool out of me?" he growled. "No, I'm ending this. Today." Wyatt smirked, sensing a spark of excitement. "So what's the plan? Another welcome to Ridgewood surprise?" Chase leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Not just a surprise, a show." But someone had been listening. At the edge of the cafeteria, sitting alone with a tray of untouched food, a student with dark hair and an unreadable expression lifted his eyes. He had witnessed the entire conversation. He knew the tone bullies used when real damage was coming, and he recognized the look in Chase's eyes, a desperation to reclaim power. He exhaled sharply and murmured under his breath, almost too soft for anyone to hear, "You're picking the wrong target, idiots." Logan glanced over, catching the whisper. "What did he just say?" Wyatt snorted. "Who cares? Probably some loser talking to himself." But Chase's pride drowned out every warning. "We're gonna humiliate her," he said, smirking again, "in front of the whole school. If she wants attention so bad, let's give her some." None of them noticed the student in the corner stiffen, his fork frozen mid-air. His eyes narrowed, not in fear for Naomi, but in fear for the bullies, because he knew something no one else at Ridgewood knew. He knew who Naomi Brooks really was, and he knew exactly who her father was. But the cafeteria kept spinning on its noisy axis, oblivious to the silent storm building. At another table, Naomi ate quietly, headphones in, not a flicker of concern on her face. Her silence, her refusal to react, made her look small, fragile even. Students glanced at her, whispering about the morning incident, but no one saw the tension in her jaw. No one saw the way she kept clenching her hands beneath the table. No one saw that she was waiting for things to settle or explode. Her stillness wasn't weakness, it was restraint. But bullies never understand restraint, and Chase mistook her quiet for fear. Naomi's silence convinced them she was easy prey, but that silence was only a mask, hiding something far more dangerous. And so the plan for a public humiliation was set for the afternoon break, a mistake they would regret far sooner than they imagined. Afternoon break at Ridgewood High was always loud, messy, and chaotic, just the way bullies liked it. The main hallway, with its endless row of red lockers and echoing acoustics, became a perfect arena for whatever stunt Chase Hartman had planned. Students flowed in from every direction, forming natural clusters that became instant audience seats. Naomi Brooks stepped into that crowd unknowingly, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression calm. She'd survived the morning. She thought maybe, just maybe, things would cool down. But predators rarely let go when they feel their pride bruised. Chase spotted her immediately. Wyatt elbowed him. Logan lifted his phone, and together they moved. The crowd sensed something was about to happen the way animals sense an earthquake before it hits. Conversations faded, bodies shifted, phones slid quietly out of pockets. Naomi walked past Chase without even glancing his way. That only made him angrier. He stepped forward and, without warning, grabbed the back of her uniform shirt and yanked with brutal force. The fabric jerked tight. Naomi's body shot backward. The buttons strained, one nearly popping off. She stumbled hard, catching herself on a locker as laughter erupted around her, bright, sharp, humiliating. "Damn, You see that? Bro, she almost face-planted. New girl getting wrecked. Naomi froze. Not from fear, but from something far colder. She reached up slowly, fingers brushing the wrinkled, stretched fabric of her shirt. The humiliation pricked at her skin, but beneath it, something else stirred. Something she tried very hard to keep buried. Chase swaggered closer, enjoying every second. "Hey, new girl," he taunted loudly. "You should thank me. I made you look interesting." Wyatt laughed. "She looks like she's about to cry again." Logan zoomed in with his phone. "Come on, Naomi, give us a reaction. Internet's gonna love this." But they got a reaction they never expected. Naomi moved. So fast that Logan, startled out of his own filming, dropped his phone. It clattered loudly across the floor. Naomi didn't shout. She didn't swing. She didn't lunge blindly like an angry teenager. She simply stood up. But the way she did it, fluid, explosive, controlled, wasn't normal. It was the movement of someone trained, someone disciplined, someone whose body knew how to fight even when her mind begged her not to. Her shoulders squared, her spine straightened. And when she lifted her head, the expression on her face made the entire hallway shift backward a step. Gone was the quiet girl. In her place stood something sharper, something forged. Her eyes locked onto Chase, two dark, steady blades cutting through every layer of his bravado. A hush fell over the hallway, swallowing every laugh. Even Chase hesitated. "What are you looking at?" he muttered, suddenly unsure. Naomi didn't answer. She took one step forward, just one, but it was enough to send a ripple of discomfort through the hallway. Students leaned back, phones lowered. Wyatt swallowed, his smirk cracking. Chase forced out a laugh. "Relax, girl, it's just a joke." But Naomi wasn't laughing, and she wasn't flinching. She wasn't doing anything but standing, yet somehow it felt like she was about to strike. Her silence was no longer mistaken for weakness. Now it felt like a countdown. In her gaze, there was no fear left. Only steel, only years of training she never asked for, only the instinct of someone who had grown up learning how to defend herself in ways Chase could never imagine. Logan whispered to Wyatt. "Dude, she looks like she's gonna tear him apart," Wyatt whispered back. "Then why isn't she? What's she waiting for?" Chase felt the air shift, heavy and unfamiliar. He didn't understand what he was seeing, but he understood one thing clearly. Naomi was not scared of him, not even a little. In Naomi's eyes, fear was gone, replaced only by a cold, sharpened resolve that had been forged long before Ridgewood High ever tried to break her. But the real confrontation only began when Chase opened his mouth and touched the one thing Naomi would never forgive. The tension in the hallway thickened as Naomi and Chase stood locked in a silent standoff. Students crowded around them, forming a crude arena, one lit by fluorescent lights and fueled by teenage cruelty. The noise had died down, leaving only scattered whispers and the faint echoes of footsteps from distant corridors. Naomi didn't move. Not forward, not backward. She stood perfectly still, breathing slow and steady, her posture rigid with control. But then Wyatt stepped in. He swaggered to Chase's side, puffing out his chest like a discount backup dancer trying to reclaim the spotlight. His grin was wide, malicious, hungry for Naomi's breaking point. "So tell me, new girl," Wyatt sneered loudly, "you think you're strong? What happened, huh? Your daddy teach you to bite people when you get scared?" Laughter exploded through the hallway like a grenade. Students doubled over. Some slapped lockers. Others screamed, "Oh!" as if this were some kind of after-school rap battle. But Naomi froze. Every muscle in her body went still. Her eyelids lowered just a fraction, enough to hide the sudden burn behind them. The air around her seemed to contract, tightening into a silent vacuum. Wyatt kept going, not sensing the shift. "Yeah, I bet her dad's some angry little dude with no job." He didn't finish. Chase, trying to show off, stepped forward and shoved Naomi's shoulder with a force meant to shock her. It did the opposite. It unleashed her. In one fluid, explosive motion, Naomi grabbed his arm, pivoted her hips, and executed a perfect shoulder throw. A move so clean, so precise, so technically flawless that half the hallway gasped before Chase even hit the ground. His body slammed onto the floor with a dull, painful thud. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Chase lay flat on his back, eyes wide with disbelief, breath knocked out of him. For several seconds he couldn't even make a sound. He didn't understand what had happened, only that he was no longer standing. Wyatt's mouth dropped open. Logan's phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the tiles. The kids recording the scene forgot to keep filming. This wasn't some messy schoolyard scuffle. This was a professional maneuver, the kind only trained fighters knew. The kind executed by people who lived in gyms, not hallways, and it came from a girl half Chase's size. The crowd stared at Naomi as if seeing her for the first time. Her stance was balanced, grounded, unmistakably practiced. Her eyes were sharp, steady, unblinking. She didn't look scared. She didn't look angry. She looked like someone who had done this before. A lot before. Wyatt stumbled backward. What the hell was that?" Logan whispered, throat dry. "That wasn't normal. Dude, that wasn't normal at all." Chase tried to sit up, groaning, clutching his back. His pride lay scattered across the floor alongside the dust shaken from his jacket. He looked up at Naomi with a fear he hadn't felt in years, and still Naomi remained silent. Her breathing was slow, controlled, the same breathing pattern she'd been taught in long, grueling training sessions, the same technique her father had drilled into her from the time she was 6, a father none of them knew existed, a father who was a legend in an entirely different arena. The truth was beginning to take shape, right in front of them. But the bullies were still too arrogant, too foolish, too blind to understand what they had awakened. And then the unthinkable happened. The video reached someone no one ever expected. The moment Chase hit the ground, half the hallway gasped, and the other half pressed record. Within minutes, clips of Naomi's flawless shoulder throw shot across the school like lightning. But Ridgewood High wasn't a closed ecosystem. Rumors leaked. Videos spread, screens lit up everywhere. By lunchtime, the footage was already circulating in group chats. By afternoon, it had jumped onto the school's unofficial social media pages, and by evening, it broke through the walls of Ridgewood entirely. No one realized how far it had traveled until it was too late. In the teacher's lounge, the atmosphere was unusually loud. Coffee cups clinked, chairs scraped, and teachers exchanged confused whispers. "Did you see that throw? Who taught that girl? That wasn't just self-defense. That was textbook professional technique." Mr. Harlow, the school's longtime physical education teacher and former amateur wrestler, was hunched over his laptop. A group of teachers crowded behind him, staring at the slow-motion replay of Naomi flipping Chase like a rag doll. Harlow replayed the clip again, then again, and again. Each time his face grew paler. "That footwork," he murmured. "And the pivot, the angle, that grip." His voice cracked. "No way." A younger teacher laughed. "What? Recognize the move? Some YouTube trend?" But Mr. Harlow didn't laugh. He leaned closer to the screen, eyes narrowing as Naomi's movement looped. His heart thudded harder in his chest the longer he watched. "That's not just any throw," he whispered. "That's the throw." The room fell silent. One of the teachers asked softly, "Which throw?" Harlow exhaled slowly, as though the truth itself was heavy. "Steelstorm's signature," he said. "Derek Steelstorm Brooks, 7-time national champion, undefeated in his prime. Famous for that exact technique." Someone scoffed. "Come on! What would a girl in high school be doing using a pro's technique?" Harlow didn't blink. "That's exactly what I'm trying to figure out." Meanwhile, across town, an entirely different group chat buzzed to life. A private thread of retired wrestlers, men who had once filled stadiums, broken bones, and chased glory, were passing around the same video. "Hey, check this out. Some kid just pulled off the Steel Storm pivot throw. Pivot's too clean. Whoever taught her isn't some amateur. Marcus, isn't this—" Marcus Steele, a weathered but sharp-eyed man in his late 50s, clicked the clip open. He watched Naomi's movement once, then he watched it twice. On the third replay, he sat up straight. Her form was perfect. Her timing was instinctive, her hip rotation identical. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Only one person he knew used that exact variation of the move. Only one student he had ever trained so intensely, so carefully, with so much discipline. "Derek," he whispered, because the girl in the video didn't just move like a wrestler. She moved exactly like Derek Steelstorm Brooks, Marcus's most gifted protege, the man whose daughter would have grown up learning these moves the same way other kids learned to tie shoes. Marcus dropped his phone. "Oh my God," he muttered. "That's her. That's his kid." Back in the teacher's lounge, Mr. Harlow stood so abruptly his chair screeched across the floor. "It can't be," he said, voice trembling. "But it is. That throw, that precision." He turned to the other teachers, his face drained of color. "That girl is Steelstorm's daughter." A ripple of shock ran through the room. Steelstorm wasn't just a wrestler. He was a legend, brutal, brilliant, unmatched. If his daughter was at Ridgewood, and she had just been attacked by bullies, this wasn't a schoolyard issue anymore. It was a ticking bomb. In that moment, the line between harmless teenage cruelty and real danger shattered, and adults finally understood the storm heading straight for Ridgewood High. But while the adults began piecing together the truth, the bullies were busy planning their next most disastrous mistake yet. The sun dipped lower behind Ridgewood High, casting long shadows across the school's back courtyard, a forgotten corner with cracked pavement, rusted benches, and, most importantly for bullies, no cameras. It was the kind of place where secrets were kept and bruises were earned. A perfect place for revenge. Chase Hartman stormed into the courtyard first, his face twisted with humiliation and rage. Behind him came Wyatt and Logan, followed by 4 other boys, bigger, louder, eager for violence if it meant a good laugh or a viral clip. A few students trailed after them, phones ready, hoping to witness something thrilling or ugly. They didn't care which. "Spread out," Chase barked. "We're ending this today." The boys fanned out, forming a rough semicircle. Moments later, Naomi Brooks stepped into the courtyard. She hadn't been lured here. She hadn't been tricked. She had simply been walking home when she saw the group waiting, blocking the path. She paused, assessing them, the way someone might study a math problem they already knew how to solve. Wyatt cracked his knuckles. Well, look who finally showed up." Logan lifted his phone, already recording. "Round 2, baby. Let's make this viral." Naomi said nothing. She simply stood there with her backpack still over one shoulder, the wind brushing a braid across her cheek. Her silence unsettled a few of the boys, but Chase mistook it for fear. "On your knees," he commanded. "Right now. You're gonna apologize for making me look stupid." Naomi didn't move. Chase stepped closer. "I said kneel." Naomi's gaze remained calm, steady, anchored. Her breathing didn't change, her posture didn't shrink. She looked like someone standing in a storm who knew it couldn't shake her. Wyatt sneered. "You deaf or just dumb?" "Maybe she needs help getting down," another boy said, cracking his neck. The group tightened around her, forming a ring. From the outside, it looked like a pack of predators closing in. But from the inside, it looked different, because Naomi didn't look trapped. She looked centered, grounded, like a fighter stepping into a familiar arena. Chase pushed her shoulder again, harder this time. "I told you to kneel." Naomi blinked once, slowly, but still didn't move. Tension rippled through the courtyard. A few of the kids recording lowered their phones, suddenly unsure of what they were seeing. One boy tried again. Maybe she's frozen. Maybe she's scared. Logan shook his head. No, she's waiting. Wyatt frowned. Waiting for what? No one answered. Because even they didn't understand the danger forming at the center of their circle. Chase stepped even closer, inches from Naomi's face. Last chance. Get down, or we make you. Naomi's voice finally emerged, quiet but cutting. I'm not kneeling to you. Gasps hissed around the circle. Chase's face twisted with fury. Fine, then we'll... He raised a hand as if to grab her again. That was the moment the air shifted. Naomi set her feet, a subtle motion, almost invisible, but to anyone trained, unmistakable. Her body aligned, her weight centered, her muscles engaged, her eyes sharpened into something unflinching and terrifying. A few of the boys sensed it too late. Guys? One whispered. Why does she look like that? Logan's grip tightened on his phone. Chase, careful. But Chase was blinded by anger. He lunged, and Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't even step back. She simply moved the way a storm moves. Controlled, fast, precise. The courtyard erupted into chaos. Some students screamed, others cursed. Phones flew up again to catch the moment. What they witnessed wasn't self-defense anymore. It was a lesson delivered by someone who had been trained for years to stay calm until the exact second calm was no longer an option. A priceless, unforgettable life lesson was about to crash down on the bullies. One they would never, ever forget. Because Naomi didn't just know one throw. The courtyard erupted the instant Chase lunged. His footsteps pounded against the cracked pavement as he hurled his weight toward Naomi, fueled by rage, humiliation, and teenage stupidity. The circle of students tightened, their shouts echoing off the brick walls. But Naomi didn't wait. She didn't retreat. She didn't panic. She shifted, a single step to the side, smooth, precise, perfectly timed, and Chase's momentum betrayed him. His arm stretched out blindly, and Naomi caught it, twisting her hips in a controlled pivot. The movement was fluid, almost elegant. In one shocking second, Chase crashed to his knees. A choked cry tore from his throat as Naomi locked his arm in a tight submission hold, pinning him with a level of efficiency that made several onlookers gasp. The pressure forced him downward, his face contorting with pain. "Holy, she's breaking him!" someone yelled. "Let go! Let go!" Chase screamed, voice cracking with the realization that he was completely at her mercy. She released him, not because he deserved mercy, but because she'd been trained never to inflict harm unless absolutely necessary. Chase crumpled backward, clutching his arm, gasping for breath. Wyatt reacted next. Badly. He charged in a sloppy, desperate rush, swinging a wild punch meant more for intimidation than accuracy. Naomi stepped inside his strike with the precision of someone who lived and breathed combat drills. Her hand caught his wrist. Her shoulder dropped. Her foot planted. And then she executed a textbook duck-under throw, flipping Wyatt over her hip. He hit the ground hard, air whooshing from his lungs as he curled onto his side. "Oh, my God!" a girl shrieked. "She just tossed him like a toy." Wyatt rolled onto all fours, dazed, coughing, trying to figure out which direction was up. Logan was the last to move. Hesitation flickered in his eyes, but pride overpowered survival. He ran at her with both arms extended, aiming to tackle her. Naomi didn't hesitate. She caught his forward motion with a double-leg counter, sweeping beneath his center of gravity. Logan's legs flew out from under him as Naomi lifted and drove him down with a controlled takedown. Clean, safe, professional. He hit the pavement with a stunned grunt. Phones trembled in students' hands. Mouths hung open. The courtyard buzzed with disbelief. This wasn't a fight. This was a demonstration, and Naomi was teaching them all a lesson. Chase groaned. Wyatt wheezed. Logan lay sprawled, blinking at the sky. Three bullies, three dominant boys who had ruled Ridgewood's hallways for years, now lay defeated at the feet of one quiet girl. Students backed away from Naomi, not out of fear, but out of awe. "Who is she?" someone whispered. "No, what is she?" The truth hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Naomi didn't move like a regular teenager. She didn't defend herself like someone guessing or hoping. Every step, every throw, every shift of her weight had been perfect, practiced, professional. Wyatt struggled onto one elbow, staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. "No one fights like that," he rasped. "No one—" Naomi stepped back, breathing steady, not exhilarated, not angry, not triumphant. In her eyes there was no thrill, no adrenaline rush, no pride, only discipline. This wasn't sport. This wasn't violence. It was self-defense, exactly as her father had taught her. To Naomi, this wasn't a battle. It was simply survival, the kind of quiet strength drilled into her bones by a man the world once feared. But the biggest shock of all was still on its way. The screams, the gasps, the frantic shuffling of feet, everything blended together in the courtyard as the dust from the fight settled. Chase, Wyatt, and Logan were still sprawled on the ground, groaning in disbelief. The ring of students remained frozen around them, phones shaking, hearts pounding, minds trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Naomi stood in the center, breathing slow and even, not triumphant, not panicked, just steady. Too steady. That was what frightened everyone the most. A sharp whistle cut through the chaos. "Hey, break it up!" Mr. Harlow sprinted into the courtyard, sweat darkening his collar, his face flushed from running. He pushed through the circle of students, eyes darting wildly, first to Chase, then Wyatt, then Logan, and finally to her, to Naomi. He stopped dead in his tracks, not because she looked dangerous, not because she looked scared, but because she looked familiar. He stared, really stared, at the posture she held, the way her feet were positioned, the calm control in her shoulders, the precision in her breathing. "Oh, no," he whispered. Students parted, creating space around him as he approached her slowly, as if walking toward a ghost. "Naomi Brooks," he said aloud, voice trembling. "You're Naomi Brooks?" Naomi didn't answer. She didn't nod or shake her head. She simply watched him with guarded eyes. Mr. Harlow swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he spoke the words no one in Ridgewood High ever expected to hear. "You're Steelstorm's daughter." The courtyard exploded. Screams, gasps, shouts overlapping into chaos. "What? No freaking way. She's his kid? Steelstorm? The Steelstorm?" Some students staggered backward. Others covered their mouths. A few clutched their phones like they were suddenly holding something radioactive, because Derek Steelstorm Brooks wasn't just a wrestler. He was a legend of brutality, a monster in the ring, a man whose training methods were feared as much as his victories. Everyone had heard the stories, the undefeated streak, the bone-crunching finishers, the training sessions that left grown men vomiting on the floor. Steelstorm wasn't a name. It was a warning. And Naomi? Naomi was his daughter. Mr. Harlow ran a shaky hand through his hair. I can't believe this. The footwork, the pivot throw, the stance. It was him. Exactly him. Whispers blazed through the courtyard like wildfire. She fights like a pro. No wonder she destroyed them. Her dad trained her? For this? She could have broken Chase's arm. The bullies felt the weight of every whisper. Wyatt instinctively crawled backward. Logan pressed his back against the wall, trembling. Chase stared at Naomi as if seeing her for the first time, not as a girl, but as the daughter of a man who made headlines for breaking ribs on live television. Fear crawled up Chase's spine like ice water. He finally understood why his wrist had screamed in pain, why her throws felt unnatural, why she never flinched, why she fought with skill instead of panic. He had picked a fight with Steelstorm's daughter, and she had been holding back. Mr. Harlow took a cautious step forward, his voice softer now. "Naomi, does your father know you're here? Does he know what happened?" She didn't answer, because she didn't need to. Her silence, calm, controlled, perfectly disciplined, said everything. It said she had lived this life before. It said she had been trained for this kind of moment. It said the bullies should have stopped long before reaching this point. The bullies finally understood the storm they had awakened, but by then it was far too late, and Naomi still hadn't spoken a single word. The principal's office had never felt so small. Every chair was filled. Every corner was crowded. The air itself seemed squeezed tight by the tension that pulsed through the room. Phones buzzed nonstop with notifications, messages from parents, students, even local groups who had somehow already seen the video of Naomi flooring 3 boys in the courtyard. The footage had gone beyond Ridgewood High. It had gone everywhere. Naomi sat quietly in one of the plastic chairs, hands folded neatly in her lap. Chase, Wyatt, and Logan sat across from her, bruised, shaken, and terrified, though they tried desperately to mask it with anger. Chase was losing that battle. "This is ridiculous," he yelled, slamming his fist onto the principal's desk. "She attacked us. She used, like, some kind of psycho wrestling moves. My arm still hurts." The principal rubbed his temples. "Mr. Hartman, yelling won't—" "She body-slammed us," Chase continued. "She's dangerous. She should be suspended, not us." Wyatt jumped in, voice cracking. "Yeah, she threw me, threw me." "No normal girl does that," Logan nodded rapidly. "My mom's gonna freak out. We could have died or something." A few parents sitting behind them murmured in concern until another parent, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a fiercer voice, stood up. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "You're afraid because she defended herself?" Chase turned, indignant. "You weren't there. You didn't see what she—" "Oh, I saw," the woman interrupted, holding up her phone. "I saw the whole thing, including the part where you boys dragged her, mocked her, insulted her, and tried to force her to kneel." The room stiffened. Wyatt swallowed hard. Logan suddenly found the floor interesting. The parent continued, voice rising like a breaking storm. "You humiliated that girl in front of the entire school, and you expect her to just stand there and take it? Is that what you're saying?" She turned her glare to the principal. "Because that sounds like victim blaming to me." Another parent, a father, stood up beside her. "Those boys cornered her, surrounded her, provoked her. Anyone would fight back, and she did it without injuring them permanently. That's restraint." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Teachers exchanged looks. The principal shifted uncomfortably. Chase's face reddened. "You don't get it? She's not normal. She's some kind of monster." Naomi's eyes lifted at that, briefly, calm, unreadable. But she didn't speak a word. Someone in the room scoffed loudly. "A monster? She's a trained student who defended herself because 3 boys twice her size attacked her." Mr. Harlow stepped forward, clearing his throat. "There's something everyone needs to understand. Naomi's skills didn't come from nowhere." The room leaned in. "She's the daughter of Derek Steelstorm Brooks." Gasps erupted like fireworks. Even some parents who hadn't followed wrestling knew the name. The stories, the rage, the discipline, the force of nature that was Steelstorm. Chase's mother covered her mouth. "Oh, my God!" A journalist might have called the moment electric, but inside the principal's office it was more like a tectonic shift. Silent, violent, irreversible. Suddenly the narrative changed. She wasn't a violent teenager. She wasn't a threat. She was a target who defended herself using skills she had been trained for her whole life. And the bullies who had tormented her, they weren't victims anymore. They were exposed. The principal took a deep breath. "Given the evidence, the testimonies, and the video footage, it's clear Miss Brooks acted in self-defense." Chase exploded. "What? She threw me like a consequence of your own actions," the principal cut sharply. The parent who had spoken earlier pointed at Chase. "Be grateful she held back. because if she hadn't, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. A hush fell over the room as tension shifted entirely. For the first time since the bullying began, Naomi wasn't the one under the spotlight. The bullies were. The balance of power had flipped. Hard. And the people who once mocked Naomi now found themselves drowning under the weight of their own actions. And then Naomi's father walked into the school. The front doors of Ridgewood High swung open with a force that silenced the entire lobby. Students turned first, curiosity flickering, then confusion, then shock, because stepping through the doorway was not just apparent, it was a presence. Derek Steelstorm. Brooks filled the entrance like a moving wall. Broad shoulders stretched the seams of his jacket. Scars traced lines across his arms like memories carved in stone. His face was stern, carved from years of grit and discipline, and his eyes, dark, unblinking, swept through the hallway with the weight of a man who had spent a lifetime being feared. A ripple moved through the students. "Is that—" "No way. No freaking way. That's Steelstorm." Kids stumbled back, bumping into lockers and benches as they scrambled to give him space. It wasn't panic. It was instinct. Like watching a tidal wave approach and knowing you were too small to stand in its way. Teachers froze mid-step. Staff members straightened automatically, as if responding to military command. Even the air felt tighter around him. Steelstorm wasn't shouting. He wasn't even angry, not visibly, and that made him 10 times more terrifying. His gaze locked onto one person, Naomi. She stood near the middle of the lobby, backpack still slung over her shoulder, expression calm but guarded. For the first time since stepping into Ridgewood High, she looked young. Steelstorm walked toward her, slow, deliberate steps that echoed across the marble floor. Students held their breath. When he reached her, he didn't roar. He didn't demand explanations. He didn't confront anyone else in the hallway. He simply placed a large, steady hand on her shoulder and asked, in a voice low and unexpectedly gentle, "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" The contrast hit the room like a shockwave. This man, this mountain, this legend, this storm, looked at his daughter with eyes full of softness, concern, love, and every bully watching felt their stomach flip. Wyatt paled. Logan whispered, "Oh my God, he's nice." Chase backed up until he hit a locker, breath trembling. Nothing in Steelstorm's reputation had prepared them for this moment. They expected rage, explosive fury, a demand for vengeance. Instead, they saw something worse, controlled power. Steelstorm straightened, looking slowly around the lobby. His expression never changed, but the effect was undeniable. Every student he passed shrank an inch. Every teacher held their breath. Every bully felt exposed. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was assessing, observing, measuring every detail like a predator analyzing a battlefield. And that was far more terrifying than any outburst. A teacher finally mustered courage. "Mr. Brooks, sir, we were just discussing the situation in the principal's office. We have some of the video footage." Steelstorm turned his head slightly, the motion deliberate and cold. "Show me." The teacher swallowed. "All of it?" His jaw flexed once. "All of it." Steelstorm hadn't raised his voice, not a decibel, and yet every person in Ridgewood High felt it. The storm hadn't hit. It was only forming. And then he demanded to see every second of the footage. The video room at Ridgewood High was normally used for school announcements and media projects. Today, it felt like a courtroom. Administrators lined the walls, tight-lipped and pale. Parents sat in rigid chairs, some trembling, some furious. Chase, Wyatt, and Logan huddled together like frightened animals. And then there was Steelstorm. He stood in the center of the room with his arms crossed, his presence swallowing every inch of air. Naomi sat behind him, silent, composed, eyes down. She didn't need to speak. Her father was speaking for her simply by existing. The lights dimmed. The first video clicked onto the projector. No one dared breathe. It began with Chase yanking Naomi's backpack, sending her belongings flying. Then Wyatt's mocking accent, Logan's recording, the laughter, the taunts, the humiliation. Parents gasped, teachers flinched. Chase's mother covered her mouth. Another clip began. The moment Chase jerked Naomi's shirt, nearly ripping it, her stumble, the erupting laughter of students, the sneer on Wyatt's face, the cruel anticipation in Logan's grin, then the courtyard footage. 3 boys circling Naomi, Chase's shove, Wyatt's jeers, the demand for her to kneel, and finally, the takedowns, clean, efficient, controlled. Naomi's mastery was undeniable, her restraint unmistakable, her right to defend herself unquestionable. The last frame froze on Chase, hitting the ground for the 3rd time, eyes wide in shock. Silence held the room in its fist. Then Steelstorm turned, slowly, deliberately. His gaze found Chase first. Chase's chair rattled as he shrank back, gripping the armrests like they might save him. Steelstorm's voice was calm, too calm. "My daughter," he said, each word heavy as steel, showed restraint. A murmur rippled through the room. He stepped closer. "She used only what you forced her to use," Chase whimpered, tears gathering. Steelstorm lowered his voice even further, making every parent and staff member lean in instinctively. "If it had been me," he paused. The room froze. "You would not be sitting here right now." A choked sob escaped Chase's throat. He pressed both hands over his face and broke down completely, shoulders shaking, breath hitching, tears pouring hot and fast. Wyatt turned pale as chalk. Logan nearly slid off his chair. Even the principal swallowed hard, unable to hide the fear tightening his jaw. Steelstorm didn't raise his voice. He didn't move toward them. He didn't make a threat. He simply stated a fact, and that was what made it so terrifying. The room remained still as stone. No one dared challenge him. No one dared speak. It wasn't just fear. It was realization. The power had flipped. Naomi wasn't the victim in this room anymore. She wasn't the one under scrutiny. She wasn't the one expected to justify her actions. The bullies were, and they were drowning under the weight of their own cruelty. Steelstorm's presence alone was enough to stretch the air tight as a wire. One wrong breath could snap it. But the official punishment was still waiting. The principal's office had never been this crowded or this tense. Parents lined the walls, some fuming, some shaky with nerves. Teachers stood rigid as statues. Naomi sat quietly near the back, still as a shadow. And Steelstorm, he remained a silent pillar of dominance near the door, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the desk, like he was judging the entire institution. Chase, Wyatt, and Logan sat in front of the principal. 3 boys who once strutted through Ridgewood High like kings. Now they looked like prisoners awaiting a verdict. The principal cleared his throat, though his voice still trembled. "After reviewing the videos, witness statements, and the context surrounding the confrontation, Ridgewood High has reached a decision." Every parent leaned forward. "Chase Hartman, Wyatt Greer, and Logan Pierce, you are officially suspended for a period of 2 weeks." Gasps exploded. A few parents shouted. Chase's mother stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "What? 2 weeks? That's outrageous." Wyatt's father jabbed a finger toward the principal. "They're the victims here. That girl. She assaulted them. She threw them. She's dangerous." The principal held up a hand, voice strengthening. "They orchestrated the harassment, public humiliation, and attempted assault of another student. There is overwhelming evidence of this." He continued, tone firm. "In addition, the 3 of them will be required to complete a mandatory anti-bullying and anti-discrimination program before returning to extracurricular activities." Another uproar. "This is ridiculous. My son isn't racist. You're punishing boys for being boys." The office crackled with outrage until Steelstorm shifted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step forward. He didn't even uncross his arms. He simply spoke. "Today, he said, his tone low but thunderous. "You did not lose your sons." Silence slammed into the room. Every parent froze. Every breath stalled. Steelstorm's eyes locked onto the row of furious parents, unblinking and cold. "You should be grateful for that." Chase's mother slowly sat down. Wyatt's father closed his mouth. Logan's mother clutched her son's shoulder, trembling. The principal swallowed, then continued in a smaller voice. "The decision is final. Ridgewood High will not tolerate violence or discrimination." The bullies slumped back in their chairs, the weight of humiliation sinking deeper than their punishment. Their parents had no more arguments. They wouldn't dare speak over the man who had just reminded them how close they came to a nightmare they couldn't control. Even the air felt like it had to ask Steelstorm for permission before moving again. No one dared challenge the ruling, not with Steelstorm standing there, a living reminder of exactly what could have happened. But what about Naomi? Justice wasn't the end of her story, and she wanted more than just a verdict. The weekend assembly filled the school auditorium to the brim. Rows of students whispered among themselves, teachers stood along the walls, and even parents occupied the back rows, drawn by the story that had shaken Ridgewood High. A soft murmur rippled through the room as Naomi Brooks stepped onto the stage. She looked small under the bright lights, dwarfed by the massive wooden podium and the sea of expectant faces in front of her. Yet there was something impossibly steady about her presence, like a flame that refused to flicker, no matter how much wind tried to extinguish it. Steelstorm stood off to the side, not on stage, but close enough to be seen. He didn't interfere. He didn't loom. He simply watched his daughter with an expression no one at Ridgewood had ever imagined him capable of. Gentle pride. The principal gestured for quiet. "Naomi has chosen to share her experience with us today." Naomi approached the microphone. A hush fell instantly. She took a breath. Slow, controlled, familiar. The same breath she used before every moment life demanded strength. "When I came to Ridgewood," she began, her voice calm but clear, "I didn't want attention. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted a chance to be normal." Some students shifted guiltily. Others leaned forward. "I grew up around wrestling, around discipline, around strength, not because I wanted to be strong, but because I had to be." She glanced at her father, then back at the room. "My dad taught me to defend myself, not to hurt people, but to stay safe, to walk in spaces that weren't made for me, to survive being judged before people even knew my name." Whispers surged through the crowd, quiet, conflicted. Naomi continued, "When Chase and the others humiliated me, I wasn't shocked. I've seen people like that my whole life, people who think hurting others makes them powerful." The bullies lowered their eyes. "I held back," she said softly, "not because I'm weak, but because I know what real strength can do to someone." That line alone made the room shift, fear melting into respect. Then she delivered the sentence that cut deeper than any throw, any takedown, any public spectacle. "I don't want to be scary," Naomi said, voice trembling just enough to be human. "I just want to be respected." Silence, a heavy, emotional silence that pressed down on the entire auditorium. Some students blinked through tears. Others bowed their heads. A few teachers wiped the corners of their eyes discreetly. Steelstorm looked down, jaw tight, not out of anger, but out of the pain of hearing how much his daughter had carried alone. Naomi stepped away from the microphone, but added one last thought. "Everyone deserves that, even me." The applause started with a single clap, then another, then a wave, not loud, not wild, but sincere, ringing through the hall like a promise. Her honesty, raw and unfiltered, cracked something open. Students cried, teachers stood taller, and the bullies felt the weight of what they had done in a way no punishment could ever deliver. And then the ending of this story unfolded in a way no one saw coming. The afternoon sun dipped low over Ridgewood High, casting long golden streaks across the courtyard. The school that once felt cold, hostile, and territorial now buzzed with a different kind of energy, one of respect, curiosity, and change. Naomi Brooks stepped outside into the soft warmth, her backpack slung over one shoulder. But today, she didn't walk alone. Students called out to her from benches, from locker rows, from the steps leading down to the sports field. "Naomi, can I talk to you? Can I sit with you at lunch tomorrow? You were amazing out there." Some looked apologetic, some looked embarrassed, some looked inspired. A few approached her quietly, their voices barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I get bullied too. How did you stay so strong?" Naomi didn't gloat. She didn't take pride in their fear, or their awe, or their sudden admiration. She answered gently, nodded when she needed to, listened more than she spoke. She felt, for the first time since transferring, that she wasn't walking through Ridgewood as a stranger. She belonged. A group of freshmen hesitated before approaching her. One girl, clutching her notebook nervously, asked, "Is it true your dad taught you all that? All the fighting stuff?" Naomi smiled, not wide, but genuine. "He taught me discipline, and how to protect myself, but not how to hurt people." The girl looked relieved and nodded. Several older boys, kids who once stared at her with mocking eyes, now approached with awkward shuffles and red cheeks. Hey, we were jerks before. Like major jerks. So, yeah, sorry." Naomi didn't make them beg. "Thank you," she said simply, and they exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for days. The air shifted again when one student, quiet and thoughtful, stepped forward. He wasn't apologizing or asking for advice. He just watched her with calm understanding. "You know," he said softly, "people keep talking about your dad. About Steelstorm." He paused. "But that's not why you changed this place." Naomi blinked. "It's not?" He shook his head. "It's because you were brave enough to stand up, alone, before anyone knew who you were, before anyone respected you. You didn't win because of your dad. You won because you showed us what real courage looks like." Naomi's breath caught. No words came at first. Then she smiled, warm, steady, unburdened, the kind of smile that comes from finally being seen for the right reasons. Behind her, the school doors opened and Steelstorm stepped outside. His towering figure cast a long shadow across the courtyard, but Naomi didn't shrink under it. She stood tall beside him. He rested a hand on her shoulder, not possessive, not protective, just proud. "You've done well," he said quietly. Naomi looked around at the students gathering near her, the faces softened, the hostility gone. "Feels different now," she murmured. Steelstorm nodded. "Because you made it different." Word of her story, her speech, and the downfall of the bullies had already begun to spread, beyond Ridgewood, beyond the district, into the community. People were sharing the videos not because a girl fought back, but because she fought back with control, dignity, and purpose. Naomi realized then that she had changed something far bigger than a hallway. She had shifted a culture, one of fear, silence, and cruelty. That hallway, once filled with injustice, would never again be a place where anyone dared to underestimate a girl. And that's how a hallway full of cruelty met the daughter of a legend and learned the difference between power and pride. Naomi didn't just defend herself. She rewrote the rules of a school that thought fear was currency. Now tell me, if you were standing in that hallway, would you have stepped back or stepped up? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story hit you harder than Chase hit the floor, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. The next one might just change how you see everything.